Hey everybody, I'm Elizabeth McSwan from Emac and Hedwig, and today's video is another Post-Processing Friday video. Woot woot! So here we go. Alright everyone, so this is the photo that I'm going to be post-processing for you today. This is of an American Avocet. I took this photo in Utah about a month ago as part of a really long trip that I did, and I'm in the process of making a video about that, which I know I said in my last post-processing video, but I'm still working on it. It's still coming together, so when it's ready, I'll link it in the description below if you're interested in hearing some stories and seeing some photographs that I'm not going to be sharing likely on social media, at least not all of them. In the meantime, we're going to be post-processing this shot of this bird here. As you may know by now, if you've been watching my other post-processing videos, the first thing I'm going to do is crop it in to my 4:3 aspect ratio, my favorite aspect ratio for wildlife, and I'm going to straighten it, although I think it does look pretty good. Let's see if, yeah, it looks pretty good. Hang on, let me just turn it a little bit more. And sometimes knowing when it's level can just be a little tricky. It's just hard to discern sometimes, but that looks pretty good. All right, so the first thing that I am going to do is, like the last time, I'm going to work on the exposure here because the light is fairly even, which I like. There are no shadows on the bird. It's really quite even, but we're going to create a little bit of contrast just to draw the viewer's eye into the head and into this really cool beak. I love Avocet's beaks. I think they're really cool. And a fun fact about Avocets is that the shape of the beak determines the gender of the bird. The males have longer beaks with less of a curve than the females. So I'm guessing just by the look of this beak with this sort of more pronounced curve than other birds that I photographed in the same series, that I would guess that this is a female bird. And if you watch my video about this trip, I have a few other birds where the heads are really, really red, and I think it has to do with breeding plumage and not so much relating to whether or not they're male or female. But anyway, so let's continue on here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little bit of a vignette here with this bird. So I'm going to make my brush, my selection brush, pretty wide. And let's turn on the selection so you guys can see what I'm doing here. And I'm just going to kind of go over most of the corners, almost this entire thing, because the light is so... It just hits the scene so evenly that we just want to create a little bit of emphasis on the bird, more so than there already is. So I'm going to bring the exposure down just a little bit. And I think I said this in my post-processing video of the piping plover shot, is that if you see that there's a vignette there, then it's too much of a vignette. I really like to have, like if I went down really like this, you can really tell that there's a vignette there, right? So I don't want to go that far. I want to go just far enough so that the bird just looks a little bit brighter, that it stands out a little bit, but you don't really notice that there's a vignette. That's sort of my ideal amount of vignette, is when you can't see it. Let's bring it down a little bit there. There we go. So now I'm going to grab another selection brush for another selection. We're going to make it really wide here, and now we're going to kind of go in like this. And so I've caught some of the head and also some of the background, and I'm just going to push it a little, again, like just a little bit. If I was going to push it like this so that you can tell that there's been a selection there, right? You can tell that there's been an adjustment there. So that's too much, but we want to bring it down enough so that it still blends into the background, but it just gives it a little bit more oomph there. All right, so that's pretty good. And now I'm going to make a third selection, and I'm going to zoom in here so that I can better do it. And let's turn on the selection. And here we go. I'm just gonna go in and I'm just selecting the bird's face and neck. And I'm gonna have to go back in here and erase some of this selection just to make sure that it's the best it can be here. Nice and clean. I try to, when I'm doing these selections, I try to err on the side of not quite going to the edge. Like, you see how there's a little bit, and I'll probably actually go back over that with the selection brush as opposed to this eraser brush. I err on the side of not selecting all the way to the edge of the subject or whatever I'm trying to select, as opposed to going a little bit over. Like, now I'm over, right? Because you can see that the selection is further than the edge of the bird. I'd rather not quite go to the edge of the bird as opposed to do what I just did. And the reason why is because the adjustments that you make, it's a lot easier to tell when your selection spills over into the background. If I, for instance, you know, let's just take that. If I do that, and then I go to make my selection, or I go to make my adjustments rather, and if I was gonna like take it down, now, I mean, this looks horrible. I would never do this, but you can see that it looks really, it looks really obvious that I did something, right? You can tell that I made an adjustment. So that's just something to keep in mind. In the meantime, though, I'm gonna erase that in there. There we go. All right. So now what I'm going to do in here is, and I do this sometimes, I'm going to, let's see what happens when I bring down the exposure on the, oh, nope, too much. So what I'm going to do here is, hang on one second. Oops. There we go. I just want to bring down the highlights a little bit in this selection. It just looks a little bit washed out to me, so I just want to bring down the highlights a little bit. And what happens if I bring down the whites? Sometimes I really don't know what these sliders are going to do until I just start playing with them. Yeah, so just a little bit. I'm just trying to add a little bit of punch into this particular area through just getting a little bit more detail and sharpness. And sometimes you can get that without actually sliding the sharper slider. You can do it by these other ones instead, like the dehaze, clarity, contrast. All of these things can help add sharpness, and perhaps not in the same kind of heavy-handed way that simply adding a bunch of sharpness can do it. So I always try these other methods first. And let's see what happens when I add some sharpness here. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some saturation back in here just to give the bird a little bit of punch. Let's see, where did we start? Sometimes I lose track of how much is too much, and I have to go back to where I started. So that looks, let's see how that looks full frame. Looks pretty good. The next thing I want to do is, I just overall in this whole image, I just want to add a bit of sharpness. Like that. And I'm going to go back to this selection here. This one here. And I just want to add a little bit more. And I want to also add a little bit of warmth. A lot of times what happens when you change the exposure on something, either you make it a lot lighter than it was or a lot darker, it changes the color and the saturation. And so sometimes I find I have to go back in to those selections, or I have to remember when I'm kind of doing this process to make sure that I am looking at the color and making sure that it doesn't look washed out, that it still is vibrant, that it still looks the way that I want it to look. And oftentimes that means playing with these color temperature sliders or the saturation slider. I do want to see what will happen when I push these highlights a little bit. And then I lower the black. I just want a little bit more contrast in here. There we go. That looks a little bit better. All right, so there we go. Let's look at the before and after here. And yeah, I think it looks pretty good. Again, not a lot of changes, not a lot of really... Oh, you know what I am gonna do though? I do think, hang on. Not a lot of changes, but I did notice something that I do want to maybe think about. Let's see, is it this one here? I do want to see if I put back in a little bit of magenta. What happens when I put in a lot of magenta? Nope, that's way too much. Just a little bit. When I compared it to the before, I just noticed that the head in here, I think let's look at the before again. It just looked, yeah, here we go. Okay. So that's a little more similar, just a little bit punched up. This side looked very warm compared to this side, and so I just wanted to add a little bit more magenta in there. So I hope this video has been helpful for you guys. I know that so far, if you've been watching my post-processing videos, I haven't done a ton of editing in these. It's been very minimalistic. And while I would say that most of the time that is indicative of the type of editing I do, there are times when I need to do more. And so starting next week, I'll start to show you guys a few more techniques that are a little bit more involved than what I've showed you thus far. So yeah, there we have it. Boom. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I hope that these videos are helpful to you. I plan on releasing these videos every Friday. If you have a specific technique that you would like to see demonstrated, please comment down below, and I'll find a photograph that I can use to best demonstrate that technique for you. If you like this video, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot and helps my channel grow and helps me bring you guys more videos like this. Also, please consider following me on Instagram. I post a lot of my work on Instagram. Also, feel free to check out our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. For as little as $2 a month, you can get early access to videos like this, along with a bunch of other really cool stuff. And until the next video, everyone, take care, happy adventuring, happy shooting, have a good weekend. See you later. Bye.